Hey, Red Clay Rambler fans, this year we're celebrating 10 years of the podcast. We just launched a fund drive, and I need your help to support this upcoming season. If you're able, please visit talesofaredclayrambler.com/donate to make your pledge through our PayPal portal. You can also become a patron on Patreon, which gives you access to perks like the Tales from the Vault podcast feed, which features remastered episodes that are no longer available. You can sign up for that at patreon.com/redclayrambler. We have brand new 10-year anniversary merch, including t-shirts, enameled pins, and a beautifully designed poster that are up for grabs when you make your pledge today. We'll also be taping a live episode on Zoom July the 25th at 7 p.m. to celebrate the anniversary. I'll be joined by Carole Epp and Britta Schroeder, as well as other special guests. Register now at brickyardnetwork.org/live. As always, thanks for listening, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 424 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I talk with Kat Hutter and Roger Lee. The pair share a studio making stoneware pottery that's decorated with bright geometric designs. In our interview, we talk about their paths to being full-time artists, splitting time between two studio locations in different states, and the roots of their modernist aesthetic. They recently celebrated 10 years of K&R Ceramics with a show at Eutectic Gallery in Portland, which you can see online. If you'd like to see examples of their work, visit katandroger.com. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Well, yeah, let's jump back in. What we were just talking about is that you spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz. So you've worked at the Merrill Co-op, which is an unusual setup for a university. It used to be an art department, and then they closed ceramics down. And I think what's left is that co-op, right?
Yeah. It's all volunteer run. Even the managers and the technicians that are up there. But I think I was there from like 2000. Oh no, I'm sorry, 95 or something like that. I'm dating myself. 95 to like 2000. It was such a great opportunity for me to just really learn how to, all the technical stuff that I needed to know. Learn how to fire gas kilns, mix glazes, and taught some classes through there too. So those are kind of like my first teaching experiences as well. It was a great space in the middle of the redwoods. And yeah, I don't know if any of you guys have been up in UC Santa Cruz's campus. It's a very beautiful environment up there.
The first time I went there, it had that feeling like, is this real?
Yeah,
because you're literally walking into a redwood forest, and then the buildings are just peppered in and out of that forest. And my understanding of the whole founding of that university is that it was essentially a bunch of hippies got together and decided we're going to make a university made up of little colleges. So there's lots of like little buildings that used to be separate colleges that are loosely now put into the university. But it's an amazing place. Yeah.
The studio was right at the basement level of the dorms there too. So it was a really, just a good opportunity for students to be a part of, like, if, on their downtime to go work in the studio. It allowed me to just go up there and hang out on the weekends. And spent some time firing kilns too.
So where did you guys meet? How did you come together?
We met in graduate school at Clemson University. We both did our Roger, as he just said, went to San Jose State, and I did my undergrad in University of Dayton in Ohio. And I think we both had professors that kind of encouraged us to explore and maybe try going somewhere different. And I know that I was interested in, checking out a different part of the country. And I had been in the Midwest at that point my whole life. So I really was like interested in getting out of the Midwest and just, I don't know, exploring, seeing what was out there. And for me, I applied to a lot of different schools. And when I went to visit Clemson, I just had this instant welcoming, and it was a pretty small program at the time. I mean, every year they bring in a different number of students, but I just remember like people coming out of their studios and talking to me and just wanting to show me around. And I remember one girl was in the painting department, and she like came out on roller skates, and I was just like, oh, this is, and the faculty that I had met, there was just this really supportive feeling to it. And I had visited a couple other schools, and they felt a lot different, where everyone's studios were closed. And I mean, they were amazing studios, and there were a lot of students, but it just didn't feel the same way. And because I was coming right out of undergrad, I think I wasn't really felt like I still needed that kind of camaraderie. So, I actually ended up at Clemson a year before Roger.
Yeah, you were in Italy when I got there. Remember that?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I ended up there a year before Roger, and then Clemson had a program, like a sister campus or school in Genova, Italy. And I was very interested in that program. Some people told me about it right when I got there. So I was away doing a fall semester abroad, and that's when Roger entered Clemson. I guess the funny story is that I had friends at Clemson that were emailing me like, oh, there's this new guy from California. You're going to love
it. The big guy from California.
And I was like, what? I'm in Italy, you guys, like, leave me alone.
The reason why how I ended up at Clemson was I actually saw this as an opportunity to just go outside of my comfort zone and experience something new. And lived in California my whole life, and I was just wrapping up my undergraduate at San Jose State, and my professor just encouraged me, Stan Welsh, she just encouraged me to just try something new and something different. So this was kind of the furthest point away from what I would have known, or known as far as my life is at the moment. And it was a great experience. All of our professors were actively still working. And it was a small program, and we had a lot of just one-on-one interaction with our faculty and advisors. And the way they set up their program there was great too, because we were all on fellowships. So they actually paid us to go to school there, gave us like teaching opportunities. So when we left the program, we already had college level teaching experiences, which, putting that towards the application process and the job field here, we were kind of already had some experience on our portfolio. So that definitely helped us out a lot. But great program. I worked with my sculpture professor and my ceramics professor, who actually both have ceramic backgrounds, and they graduated from Alfred University. Mike Vadalero and David Detrick. And so it was just a well-rounded program for me. We had an Anagama there. I think it was the only Anagama in South Carolina at the time. Soda kilns, had a good facility there too. So great program.
I want to add to that, like part of the financial aspect of it was that, you had an assistantship. I think a lot of schools do that. But what I loved I remember this specifically about Clemson, was that they, even though I was there technically for painting, they had seen that I had printmaking experience. And so my first TA experience was with the printmaking department and with Sid Cross. And it was so amazing to be able to have this sort of range of access to different mediums while we were there. And I also learned so much more about printmaking. I did have some experience from undergrad. And I know, like, I think Roger had an assistantship with the wood shop, and like they really there was like this attention to people's experiences and like personal like specific experiences with different mediums that you had before you got there that they kind of looked into, and then they would, so there was like this variety of experiences there. And I think on top of like then second year we were teaching, and so it really kind of gave you this wider view of like things you could do while you're going to school. And also we just had access, I think maybe this is like one amazing thing about continuing on your education, is access to facilities and equipment. And I mean, I remember the paintings I was making back then were like, I was making these crazy structures in the wood shop, but I got to spend all this time in the wood shop, and I probably would have never done that if I didn't have access to that. And so I think that was another amazing thing about that program that I still feel very grateful for.
I think this is good advice for young listeners that want to pigeonhole themselves because they think that'll push them farther in a career. It's actually the opposite. I think you train in a broad amount of things, and then after you get out of school and you're done with everything, then you just figure out what's the most practical job in the arts in my location. And sometimes that's not what you train to do. You might end up working in a theater building sets as opposed to being a painter, or, whatever the job you end up getting. You just kind of make it work wherever you land.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, and especially nowadays, like you have to have more experience than one thing. It's because there could be so many other people out there trying to do that same one thing. I mean, in fact, there are. It's not even there could be, there are. And so what's going to set you apart, or how are you going to be flexible, because everything's always changing, right? And I mean, we clearly know that from the past few years. So you have to be able to be flexible, especially as a creative, and figuring out where you fit and then letting that change and adapting to whatever your life's going to throw at you, because it will throw things at you.
Yeah, for sure. I would have to say, like, most of my education came from just my job experiences, working in I've had jobs working in, different factories, different studios, volunteer jobs. But yeah, that's where I really learned how to, all the hands-on operations of working in the studio came from that. And, obviously school has trained us to further our careers as artists. But if it wasn't for the experience, I don't know if we would be what we're doing, because it seemed like all the jobs just kind of like lined up to running our own business at this point. If we look back and, like there's retail experience and there's studio facilities. I don't know. They're just a production, I guess you can call it. So
at one point, didn't one or both of you work at Heath?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both worked at Heath when we first moved back to Los Angeles. The location here in Los Angeles has a little studio. in the retail shop. And so I had a position there for about 3 years. I was I don't know what my title was, but I was an assistant to the studio director. His name was Adam Silverman, and he's a studio potter, going on to like more sculptural works now. But I treated that like it was an assistantship for me, and learned a lot about the ins and outs of working in LA. And LA is a different place. It's definitely operates in its own way. And Kat was working in the retail area, which kind of exposed her to a lot of different, like, just clients that would come in. I don't know. You want to talk about that?
Maybe a little history from how we got from Clemson to here. I don't know. There's so much we could talk about. So maybe you can piece this together later and make it make sense. But so after graduate school, so Roger and I had a lot of jobs between school and when we started K&R. And we moved around a lot. In the beginning, we moved. Actually, I remember after I graduated, I ended up getting a job at a small gallery in Anderson, South Carolina, just because I thought, okay, teaching, I love it. It's really comfortable for me. But I kind of always had this interest in like the gallery, just to see what that was like. And so anyway, I worked at the small gallery. And then while I was there, I was like, okay, maybe this isn't for me for right now. And I kind of started getting that itch to go somewhere else, try something new. So I started applying for teaching jobs, and then ended up landing a job in Oregon at Western Oregon University, which is like an hour outside of Portland. So we ended up thinking like this was a really good time for us to just sort of move on to the next thing. And we decided we wanted to do it together. So we went to Portland. We moved to Portland and had a couple other friends that were moving there at the same time. And then taught in Portland. Roger was landscaping and doing other things. And that's actually when he started working for Mud Shark Studios, where he met Brett and Chris, Brett runs Eutectic Gallery, and Brett and Chris run Mud Shark. So this goes way back, but that's a really important part of our story, because it definitely stuck with us and come back around now. But okay, so then we were there for a while, and then we moved again to Lake Tahoe and taught at a small university there. And that was an amazing experience. And while we were there, I think we were both, during this whole time, we both were working on our own work, both like separately, mostly separately at the time, and setting up studios wherever we could. And then working, like, obviously you have to maintain a living. So doing whatever we had to do. And when we were in Tahoe, I think was when we realized that we really wanted to put more energy into our work and like finding the right audience for our work. And I know from personal experience, like I love teaching, but I sort of had this feeling like, well, teaching will always be there. This is what I thought at the time. But I kind of want to try, like, what if we try something else? What if we were like put more into like being artists, and what will that mean? And also at the time we were sort of feeling the itch to be closer to family, and Roger's from Los Angeles. So that's when we decided to make the move to LA. Roger moved there a little bit before me, and he started working at Heath while I was still in Tahoe finishing out my contract. And that's kind of what brought us to LA. Just this sort of feeling like it's now or never. We gotta like be somewhere where our artwork, where we have the right kind of audience. And that's a whole other conversation about finding your audience. But and then when I moved to LA, I naively thought, oh, there's like all these schools. No problem. I'm going to find a teaching job. Well, that wasn't the case. And I needed a job. And so I used to go into Heath. I don't know if I went in there to like meet Roger for lunch or something. And it just ended up being that they needed help at the time. They were hiring. And so I got the job, and I was a shop girl is what we call them when we work in retail. But it was this really interesting experience because a lot of people that worked there at the time were also artists. And a lot of us had MFAs in different fields, writing. I've worked with, actors and tons of creative people. And Heath had just opened in the last few years. So we were just sort of like, I don't know, it was just this really good energy there. And like Roger said, I definitely learned a lot about the city and just, well, first of all, how to sell ceramics. I am not a ceramic artist, so a lot of what I've learned is through Roger and being around ceramic artists, and then being in that environment where you're selling it, you're learning about this amazing history that goes into making this amazing product. And then what people expect when they're spending a certain amount of money on a certain product. And I'm comfortable around people. I enjoy talking to people. So it was a good experience. And I did learn a lot, and I wasn't expecting to. At the same time, we were both teaching and catering. And at one point I worked at a museum as a preparator, installer, and then interim registrar. So I think at one point, between the two of us, we had like 5 jobs, 5 or 6 jobs. But we talk about those times as like, they were fun, and they were just full of like all these different experiences, all these different groups of people. And especially like all those jobs, just people from all different walks of life come together, and you just kind of like just hashing it out, and you're doing what you got to do to like live in the city. And
well, I think it was those first jobs that really exposed us to like a good core group of people that are still in our lives, and we consider them some of our best friends. The funny story about Heath is like, yeah, there were probably 7 employees there that we all had MFAs. We used to call it the MFA graveyard because people could just get out of school, and then we all needed jobs. But it was such a creative place to work. And, we'd have little exhibitions there. And if there was one thing that I could say that what we really got out of working at Heath, it was the story and the legacy of Heath, Edith Heath, and what has passed on as far as her legacy and what that does for the company Heath now, right? There's a lot of integrity, not only behind the product, but also her as a maker of the time. And it's a timeless product too. It's still really relevant now, all made locally here in California. And these are all just all qualities that we appreciate as well. So
yeah, no, I want to back up and point out that when you talk about having all these jobs, but that the energy was right at the place, like that's what was attracting you, not necessarily the money, because I would imagine none of those jobs made that much money. But this is a very California story. Like when I lived in Santa Cruz, same way. Everyone had 3 or 4 jobs because it's the Californian reality. It's just expensive to live there.
Yeah, totally. I agree. It seems obvious now that you say that. Like at the time you're like, oh, I need to work because I need to make money because I need to live here. But yeah, none of those jobs you do just for the money, because there are other jobs that you could probably make more money. But yeah, and I think as creatives, or at least I know I felt that was the first time after Portland, actually, that I really lived in a city. And I mean, LA is like next level city, right? So I just felt like I got to dive in. If I'm scared or overwhelmed, that's not going to help me. It doesn't, you can't live like that in Los Angeles. You have to throw yourself in and dive in the deep end. And, you know, some people enjoy that and some people don't. And at the time it was just exactly what I needed. And I think Roger, being from here, is just kind of used to that. And, yeah, we talk about all the time, like the people that we worked with back then and we're still really good friends with, and you just can't recreate those experiences with people when you're all in the same position. There's just like this sort of rawness to being at that moment at the same time with these people, and you're all in the same situation, but you're all doing different things. It's like you're working this job so that you can do other things and you can make your artwork and you can go to auditions or you can work on your novel or.
Yeah. I mean, we always maintained a studio practice too, wherever we were. In LA, we had a studio out in East LA, and it was great because, you know, we worked our whatever 2 to 3 jobs that we had, but we always made time for our studio. And I think all that kind of did feed into our studio practice and what we did, and it actually made it that time way more valuable. So we were eager to get into the studio and work. Yeah, I remember working in Portland. I was landscaping at the time, and you know, that job I probably did because I needed a job and needed to make some money. And I was so miserable though, working in the rain, just months, days after days of just rain and being outdoor. I loved it at the time at some points, but towards the end, I was like, okay, what am I doing? Because I wasn't even putting any time towards my studio work. And that's how, you know, Kat encouraged me to go look into finding a studio nearby, and Chris and Brett Muchark Studios popped up, and I don't even think they were ready to hire anybody at the time, but kind of like I didn't give them an option really. And I remember there were times where they were like, I don't think they could quite pay me or whatever, but I would trade my wages for studio or kiln space. And that's how I would like generate some work that I could sell on the weekends. And I don't know, we figured it out. It was a very creative process of trying to make ends meet, but it was fun.
And actually in Portland is when we first literally put paint on his pieces on the ceramic. We made these like weird, pretty not attractive, like sculptural forms. I mean, the forms were great, but the painting on them, I look back and I'm like, ugh. You know, different time. But that was, because Roger actually talked our landlord into letting us turn the garage into his studio. I was working out of this warehouse in Portland with a guy who built bikes for Burning Man, and he lived in the warehouse. So there were like these 4 guys, big like metalheads, and then I had like this little corner studio, which that was also like really cool to me at the time. But that was, Roger made these pieces and then I painted on them, and then we also made some like platter forms, and I like members of our family still have some of those. And then we didn't do it again until we moved to LA. But so we had like, I guess the impetus was there. We kind of knew, well, okay, this could go on that, and like, let's just try it. And because we were working other jobs, like we had, like Roger said, that time in the studio was like a totally different thing in terms of like valuable. It was time when we could really experiment with stuff. So yeah, I don't know how many people have seen those, but that was really when we first put, my paintings on Roger's clay form. So
I was going to ask what the seeds of your current aesthetic are, and it sounds like that was it. That was the seed. It was putting your paintings onto his sculptures, and that, even though that didn't immediately turn into K&R, down the road it came back, which is, I think, how my art practice is the same. Like I'll be looking at some artist and I'll think about their work, and 5 years later I'll realize that I'm drawing from it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where we are now, it went all back to, I would even say like grad school, just kind of looking at each other's works and being inspired by each other's studio practices. We all had our own individual spaces, so it was always interesting walking into somebody else's space and being influenced or inspired by it. And there was also, I think we also share the same energy as far as our creativity too. What you think? I mean, we like being prolific and we like getting in the studio and keep working, and that's the energy that we kind of feed off of too.
Yeah, that's something that I think right away we both found this mutual respect for each other from our work ethic, and how much, like for me, how much Roger was in the studio, and when he was there, how dedicated he was to being there. And I feel like I was the same way. And when I was in the studio, it was like, that was our priority. That was what we were there to do. And that's, I just think both of us like appreciated that. And we saw that in each other. It was like, oh, this is like, we're here to make artwork, and we're here to make as much as we can,
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Amico Brent. For the past 100 years, Amico Brent has been creating ceramic supplies for our community, ranging from underglazes to electric kilns, and they have no plans of slowing down. With over 3,000 products, Amico Brent's top priority is making sure that all of their customer needs are met. From the professional to the student and everyone in between, their high-quality materials enable you to make your best work. To learn more, check them out at amico.com or on Instagram and Facebook at Amico Brent. You can also show them how you use Amico by sharing your work online with the hashtag HowIAmico. The Tales of a Red Clay Rambler is made possible in part by Snow Farm, the New England craft program. Summer and fall workshops are now open for registration, including a 9-day reduction firing workshop with Doug Peltzman in August. Simple housing, fresh home-cooked meals, and the beautiful New England landscape will round out your retreat-like experience at Snow Farm. See the full schedule and register today at snowfarm.org. Let's talk through the current body of work, how the actual workflow works. So, Roger, you're making the pots, is my understanding, right? You're the thrower.
Yeah.
And then Kat, you're the decorator, but decoration is slower than throwing. So how do you make this all work?
We pace ourselves through bodies of work. So we have a few different lines of production. We wholesale to stores, which on the surface treatment, it's all stripes, which is a production method, right? Which is very quick and more fluid. I think Kat's production and my production are almost at the same level, and we can just move through a large quantity of work that way. And that's also like our bread and butter as well. We've been working with some of these stores for over 10 years now. They've always been so reliable as far as just carrying us through the next season or whatever. And then we have the collection where it's Kat's patterns on the surface, and most of this stuff is more functional, utilitarian pieces. So yeah, I would, Kat does tend to spend a little more time painting each piece. And then for what we did in our most recent show that's up right now, we made this body of work just for the show. So it was almost like a chance for us to really slow down and just have like multiple pieces going on in the studio. I was working on a few of my own personal pieces where I was actually doing a lot of the surface treatment, as well as Kat was painting on hers. The way this whole thing started is because we wanted to get our business running, really. And so, I tailored a lot of the work for Kat to be able to treat the surface as a canvas. And that required me to like take a step back and really kind of simplify my forms, but still keep it really refined. And that was really challenging because it was like drawing a perfect circle. It's really difficult to really perfect a form, I guess, and in its most basic, simplest form. But yeah, that allows Kat to be able to treat the surfaces with her paintings, and then we just kind of figured out certain things that worked, certain where it would frame out her, like putting her work into context almost on the piece. And then we're still figuring it out. We're still looking at different ways to accomplish this collaboration that we have together. What do you think, Kat?
Yeah. Just like I said, like being flexible throughout this whole process has been really important for us, because when we started, we both have our own practices. We both know we can work. But when we started this together, it was sort of like we were both working at Heath and we saw this thing happening with ceramics and these people, just this like return to handmade things. And so we thought, okay, let's give this a shot. But it was right from the beginning, it was like, this is long term. If this is what we're going to do, we want this to last. Once we realized it had some legs, it was like, well, okay, how do we maintain this forever? And I think those are decisions we always come back to that, because and this, I'll get there to like in terms of the workload, but because it does take me a lot longer to paint on the surfaces than it takes Roger to throw them. And then that doesn't include all of the other steps that it takes with ceramics. You obviously, most people listening to this will know that, but I didn't know all that. And then after the painting, there's glazing and then there's, all these things. So, but throughout the process, we have had to make decisions because the painting was just taking so long. Like in the beginning, when we started working with stores, it was the patterns were that's all we made. And so at the time it was great because it really got our work out there and it kind of gave us this aesthetic that people now know us by. But at one point it was like, this is not sustainable. Like I can't paint this many pieces this fast and have it and not lose my mind. And we did have an assistant at one point, and she was great. She would come in and help paint because every color, all the underglazes are 2 to 4 coats to get that really flat, opaque look. So that's like a lot of painting over and over. And although I like the repetitious nature of that, and I don't have a problem with that, it started to become too much when we were wholesaling it. And then when she left, we just decided, okay, we had to reshift. We had to reevaluate what we really wanted from this. And that's when we decided to come up with the wholesale collection, which are the stripes. And then we stopped selling the pattern work through stores because we felt we needed to bring that back to us, keep it closer to home so that it could grow and we could maintain our connection to it and it would be fresh. And then the wholesale work actually kind of satisfies this constant, like sometimes you just want to go in the studio and work and stripe, 12 planters and 20 cups or whatever. Because it's repetitive and it's almost meditative at a certain point, and it's fulfilling to have this much work done. And then that, we still feel like that has the heart and soul of who we are, the colors, the palette, the earthiness, the textures of the clay, but it's just a little bit more conducive to production. And those are things that I've had to learn, and that Roger's really good at. Like, he's really efficient in the studio. And I think studio potters have to be, because I've heard you talk a lot about like it's organization, and it's, knowing what works best in your studio to get as much work that you feel you need to get done as you can. It's also a lot of time that goes into ceramics, like drying and all these things, which these are like things I'm like still learning about, 10 years later. So, so what all those decisions have allowed now is we're at this point where when we made that decision to switch to wholesale, it was like, all of a sudden it was just this like energy, this blast of energy I felt I could have back to let the surface designs evolve. And maybe no one else would notice. I think people have noticed, but like for me, I felt like I could spend more time with each piece and really keep myself creatively fed, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. But yes, it takes me a lot longer to paint the pieces. And what Roger like finds ways, he'll start working on other pieces, or he does all of our shipping, and there are like so many other things that we've figured out. Maybe he'll make a batch of cups that's ready for me to paint while he's shipping out a wholesale order, or there's just and we're 10 years in, so it's hard to say like when those things shifted, but we've just figured out kind of how to make the time work. And also in terms of the surface design, my painting style has changed a lot since we first started. I remember our first pop-up, I was doing a lot of small, repetitive brushwork layers, because I didn't, it was just very experimental. And I think our first batch of work, we even used porcelain. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once everything came out of the kiln, it was like, some of it worked, and most of it I was like, ugh.
It was a different aesthetic. It was like glossy white, really glossy, I'd say. Not like what you see on our work now.
Yeah. So it's been like a learning process of, okay, I don't really like that. That's not what I thought it was going to look like. And then that's kind of when I started going back to my my love of like repetition and graphic design, which I kind of honed in on when I was in school. And so that's sort of when we were making more, and when Roger kind of had this idea to put the underglaze on Rodsbod, that changed our aesthetic completely. And that's sort of how we were like, oh, this, yes, this satisfies me and it satisfies Roger. Then it was, yeah, we just kind of took off running. And because we're making a lot of pieces, it did affect what I was putting on the surfaces, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, going back to Kat was mentioning how we transitioned from the stripes that we do in our production to from the pattern work. I think that we hit a point, and Kat was really feeling it, where it was just labor at that point. It was just one piece after the other. I enjoy doing some of that because that's the part of the process that I love. I love throwing, so that's just in the nature of it. But I think if anything that we've learned from that was like we were trying to preserve the joy that we have in making, and not get burnt out. And so we've kind of had to flip the our process a couple of times, to keep doing what we're doing. Kat's still painting patterns on the surfaces of our pots, but we're still trying to be inventive and creative and still try to work fresh new ideas. But I think if we were still using that in our production, we would not only have burnt out, but I think the integrity of the work would have also suffered as well. So I think that's like a huge accomplishment, but also something that we're always just trying to maintain, is just the integrity of our work. And I don't know, you see businesses always just kind of like they hit that high point and then either plateau or they drop off. And as far as our business and as far as our what we have created, our identity, we just wanted to keep that going on the high note, and just keep accelerating and elevating that. So, I mean, these gallery opportunities are what feeds that too. It allows us to create new work and just explore, give us a time to just look into a lot more of that type of process.
Well, I love that you talked about sustainability in the beginning. Like 10 years ago, you were thinking, whatever we build, this is it. Like, this is going to be our life. We've had other jobs. We want to make, a partnership together aesthetically that will sustain us. And what you brought up is something that I've talked to a lot of people about, is like you kind of peak in productivity and interest. And then it's like, where do you go from there? Do you end up hiring more people and kind of farming out the labor? Or do you, like what you said, is you divide and conquer? You go towards production in one way, and then you go towards maybe more fulfilling individualistic pieces that are sold retail. So I think that's a common story. But what's interesting is a lot of people, I think, don't realize every person has to make this choice, and whatever choice you make's not wrong. You just have to buy into your choice and like ride that wave as far as you can.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, is like, and being in LA, we have so many friends and peers that have had to make those decisions, in the same time period that we have, and everyone does it differently. And what's cool to see 10 years in, is a lot of the people that were sort of doing this at the same time, everyone's doing it in their own way, and they have their own audience, and we all respect what each other's doing. So like you said, there's no right or wrong way. I think for us, it's always coming back to that idea of sustainability. And at the end of the day, we love making work. That's it. So the thought of having other people make it for us, I don't want to manage people. Roger doesn't want to manage people. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, we love making the work. So, you try things, and then sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I think the fact that there's two of us helps a lot, because we can build each other up and help each other make those decisions and not feel alone or feel so much pressure to like make the wrong decision. So, at the end of the day, I still can't believe this is what we do. I mean, Roger always be like, how does it feel to be a potter? I'm like, you're not a potter. But it's like, we just want to keep being able to do it. And it's the fact that we've been able to do it for this long is just crazy.
One of the strong aesthetic elements is colorful geometry, which we've talked about, the painting of pattern on top. But the other is speckles, and this sense of like almost like 70s and 80s ceramics coming back is something that's happened in the broader context, like not just you guys, but your work doesn't come across as trendy, even though it has the elements of the other potters that are trendy. So I don't really know how to ask this question, but like, how do you make speckles and color geometry look cool and not trendy?
Well, first of all,
that's a huge compliment. Thank you.
I was just going to say, thank you for saying it's not trendy because, I mean, nothing wrong with people who are trendy, but I think that's something that we are very aware of not becoming, or that goes along with the idea of sustainability, is that when we started this, it wasn't a trend, and we were really making work that was true to who I am and true to who Roger is. And to me, that's the thing that comes through most strongly in the work, is that it really is like a true collaboration of my aesthetic and Roger's aesthetic coming together. Mm-hmm. And the way we make the work changed once we started making it together. It was like, painting on the surfaces, I'm always aware of the forms. You can't separate the two. And Roger, knowing the pieces that are going to be painted on, like he said earlier, he's making work for that purpose, like not for that purpose, but with the idea that something's going to go be painted on the surface. So
the speckling is almost something we do not have control over. It's in our clay body. And we just use it's a regional clay body too. I should mention. The materials are sourced out of West Coast clay bodies, but it's a commercial product from Laguna called Rodspod. But what that does is there's impurities in the clay that burn out, and it goes through our glaze and the underglaze. And there's also a little bit more melt in the clay body that actually kind of fuses the underglaze to the surface to make it look like more of a glaze and not just floating on top. I don't know if that makes sense. Amico came out with the velvet underglaze is that Fire to Cone 10 now. So the really interesting thing right now is that we're having, what was only, really you were able to accomplish it just from like a low fire or mid fire range. Now we're getting that in the stoneware range. So we're getting these vivid colors with graphics with the stoneware aesthetic. And I think that's just just kind of a warm collaboration there that I think people are just starting to respond to, because it is fresh, but I don't know how to answer the question about, if it's trendy or not. I don't even know, I think trends come and go, but we're just trying to I think this is what we do in our studio, I suppose.
Well, I think that you've been a part of the trend. That's what I wanted to say. Also, you predated the trend, but I think other people have seen your work and then are copying that. And there's also kind of an East Coast, West Coast. There's a lot of speckled pots being made in Brooklyn, that are a slightly different aesthetic. But I do think there's a relationship that people are looking at your work and other people's work, and it's starting to spread out wider. But there is something timeless about the speckle. That's what I see in it, is that if you don't fire it with that clay body, those patterns, like you said, that underglaze will be on the surface. Somehow that speckled makes it come into it in a way that just transports me into the past in a really different way, but it doesn't seem stale. So you're kind of riding that fine line, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we kind of experimented with different clay bodies, and we're kind of stuck with the Rodspod just because of the warmth that it offers. For me, it also kind of lends back to the whole idea or the aesthetic of California pottery. It was, big in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, it's just been around, and I think it's a very regional aesthetic too. My first instructor at Santa Monica College was Bruce Tompkinson, and he always had that play between form and surface, where his surfaces were more exposed clay with iron oxide, and there was just that warmth of clay and glaze, and I think that just kind of stuck with me from the beginning, because he was the first person I learned from. It's just our identity, and now I guess.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for saying that about our work, because that is like, to me, that's the biggest compliment somebody could give you is, first of all, they connect with the work, but also that it doesn't really fit into one thing or another. And I think that's because Roger and I both, I mean, we're obviously inspired by the 60s, 70s, 80s, the aesthetic of that time, those time periods. But I know from my perspective, like I'm very hyper aware that I don't want the patterns or the surface design to be too reminiscent of any specific style or era, because to me, it's really about abstraction and compositional relationships. I mean, those are the things I'm thinking about when putting the pieces together. I'm not influenced by any specific design era or specific person's work or a specific palette. It's really comes from so many different things that I think I try to put all those things in the work. And I think Roger is the same way. And we don't want to be like pigeonholed into one specific look. I think that to us is where the creative process has to keep growing and changing and evolving, because our lives grow and change and evolve and our inspirations change. And for us, it's important to put all of that into the work.
Part of your guys' story has been splitting studios. So you work in LA, and then you also have a connection to Wisconsin, Fond du Lac, right? Isn't that where you are?
Yes, Fond du Lac. Yep.
Totally random. Well,
what's in Fond du Lac? Random. Well, so I'm from Fond du Lac.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, that is my hometown. I have a large family, and I have 3 sisters, and all 3 sisters are there now. I mean, everyone's kind of moved around, but we're all back, at least for certain amounts of times. And, I grew up there. I couldn't wait to leave after high school. And then the older I got, I would go back during the summers to visit. And me and my grandparents lived on this lake in town. And we spent every summer at that lake, living in this little cabin on their property. And I didn't realize till I got older how much that really was ingrained in my upbringing. And then when I would go back, I just found that I'd be wanting to stay longer in the summers, especially as my sisters all got older and our relationship started to change and they started having kids. And, I'm really close with my parents. So I don't even know how we got to that decision to be like, hey, let's buy property there. I don't.
We were trying to buy property here in LA, and obviously it just kept slipping through our fingers there. But this opportunity came up. I was actually searching in Wisconsin because the amount of space you can get out there, and as far someone who is a studio potter, that is gold, right? To be able to have the property land to be able to build out a studio. So I always had this kind of like a small little fantasy of being somewhere in the country, I guess. But this property came up, and it was in really close proximity to the lake. The lake has a whole, it's kind of a legacy of its own in Kat's family, but it's really close to her parents' house and her family. But it's an acre of land, and it has 2 outbuildings, which were pretty much the key asset in the whole property there. One's a cinder block barn where we built a gas kiln. Another, I had a lot of help from my brother-in-law, or second brother-in-law, Tom Gill, who is a welder by trade. So he helped me frame out the kiln, and I bricked it up and got gas to the kiln. But he helped out a lot. He was very instrumental in that kiln. But so we do have access to a gas kiln now, and then we have another 1,000-foot garage space, which is our studio. And they sit right next to each other on our property. But it's it's a perfect place. We go there during the summer. I mean, I should say it's perfect during the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're back here during the winter time, but it's just such a pleasant area. We're just right outside town, so it's right where the kind of the more rural area starts. Yeah, I mean, it's all self-contained there. We have our home studio. Now we have clay being shipped from California all the way there because didn't even think about that. We can't get rod spot in the Midwest, so we have to have Laguna ships it out there for us. Yeah, we're totally self-operating there. We can run our wholesale business there, and this year we do have another show opportunity, so we're going to be working on some show pieces out there too. For most part, it really being in two different places that are totally different, like Los Angeles to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, it really helps us appreciate both areas that we live in. In LA, we live with my family here, so it allows us to be close to both of our families. But LA is such a wild place that if you don't take a break from it, you don't really realize the qualities of LA, right? With things that you kind of forget to appreciate. And I think the same thing with Wisconsin too. If the winters get long there, and things, you start to appreciate the city life. I mean, it's a juggle and a balance. But I think we have the best of both worlds there.
It kind of comes back around to the idea of sustainability too. We were just thinking, trying to buy something here is like, wait, what are we doing? We can't, I've been wanting to spend more time with family, and we found this great property there. And it's like, we can do what we're doing from anywhere as long as we have a studio, thanks to the internet. So it was just sort of like, oh, okay, let's explore this and let's give it a shot. And then, yeah, it was really like, I was being really, really, picky about like things I'm not going to compromise on if we're going to buy something there. And just because I'm from there and I know the reality of living there, and it was like, okay, once this property came up, it was the studio spaces alone were just like, oh my gosh, that we could just see ourselves growing into those spaces. And, the Midwest in the summer is a totally different place. I mean, psychologically, it's a shift. And I think I was missing that. Being in California in the summer, especially Southern California, it gets so hot that it's almost like a reverse. It's hard to be outside all the time in the summer here because it's so hot. And then in Wisconsin, it's, winter here inside. So it's really the best of both worlds. And I know for me, it satisfies this need for contrast. I can tend to get kind of restless sometimes, and being able to have home bases in two totally different places is just, it's been really good for us personally. And I think for our work too.
It's nice because it sounds also like family is a value for you. So being able to move, LA family and Wisconsin family, like this, how can I say this? My parents are getting older, and I'm starting to think about, I only have X amount of time with them, and I don't know what X is. So how do I spend as much time with them as possible, but also not spend so much time with them that I don't annoy them or me?
Yes.
So you guys have figured it out. Well, we're figuring it out. Let's just say. Yeah. Yeah. It's been interesting. I mean, I'm glad we were able to do this, and at a point in our lives, yeah, our parents are getting older and stuff, but I mean, I think it's just that point in our lives then, right? It's like, we've been very fortunate to be able to maintain what we are doing as well. keep that going. And we were so grateful to be able to sustain ourselves doing this too. And it's just we're literally, it's been a dream of ours, so it's great.
Well, to wrap up, can you guys plug the show that's up right now? I think the show Eutectic's still going on, isn't it?
Yeah. So Eutectic Gallery is in Portland, Oregon. The show is up till mid-May, I believe. You can see some of it on their website. If you go on their Instagram page, it's Eutectic Gallery. They have a walkthrough, so you can see the gallery there. If you have a chance to go check it out. We also did a tile collaboration with Pratt & Larson that was in Portland, Oregon as well. So we somehow incorporate some of the tiles into the table that the work is displayed on. Just kind of did like an installation, if you want to call it that. But we have some tile boards in the back as well. But it's a really kind of a new, fresh body of work, new patterns that we made at the beginning of this year. Some different texture pieces that I was experimenting with, some larger scale pieces than our regular production. It was a great opportunity for us to just start the year off with this project in mind. Yeah, we're really happy with the show.
Yeah, the work at Pratt & Larson, that was interesting. I can see tile in the pots. Like in my mind, I can imagine how it translates. But then seeing them actually translated into tile, it's somehow different than what I was expecting. It like you said, it's fresh. It's a different way to look at this. So I thought that work was really nice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's an ongoing thing. So, we came up with this collection, and then Pratt & Larson will be making it so you can, hopefully for a long time. So that's something anyone can order, and you can either come up with your own pattern, or we have suggested patterns, or you can come to us and we'll design a mural, whatever. But yeah, like you said, it's like this whole other like appendage now to K&R that I don't even like, I still can't. It's just really cool now to see it started and launched, and then see what happens to it as it goes out into the world and as other people interpret it and bring it into their homes and live with it. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Can you guys leave your website and also social media so people could get in touch if they want to?
Yes. Everything is Cat and Roger. So www.catandroger.com. Instagram is at Cat and Roger, and spelled Cat ANDROGER. Yeah.
Your names work well together. Like, what if your names didn't work well together? How would you do this?
That was a long conversation.
Oh, really? Which one was first?
Roger and Cat didn't roll off the tongue.
It doesn't roll off the tongue so well.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to do this. It was really nice to chat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, we appreciate you asking us, because we're always kind of figuring out like where our place is in the ceramic world or the craft world or art world. I don't know, but it was an honor to be asked. We've been scrolling through your podcasts and got some really great people on your feed, and it's nice to know that there's a platform for everybody, for all of us out there. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to thank Cat and Roger for coming on the show. I've been a big fan of their work for a long time, so I'm glad we can make this happen. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Snow Farm and Amico Brent. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the show, you can get in touch through the Brickyard Network website. That's brickyardnetwork.org. Also want to encourage you to give to our fund drive. This is to celebrate the 10th year anniversary of the show, and you can make your donation today at talesofaredclayrambler.com/donate. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.
We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities whose lands we reside on in the United States, and recognize that we are uninvited guests on the occupied, unceded, and ancestral lands of over 500 nations indigenous to North America. By acknowledging and reflecting upon the contemporary lived experiences and histories of the Indigenous peoples here and globally, we may begin to take essential steps towards creating a more equitable world. Learn more through the #HonorNativeLand initiative of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, and consider contributing to Indigenous-led organizations doing important work to further health and wellness, sovereignty, and self-determination of the first people of the lands you reside. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.